Welcome to Chapter 12, Section 1, Circles and Circumference. A circle is the set of all points in a plane that are the same distance from the given point. So we call that given point here the center. So all of these points around the edge of the circle are the exact same distance from that one center point. We call the distance from the center to the outside of the circle the radius. We abbreviate that with the variable r. Then, if we put two radii together that go through the center, that would be the diameter. We use the variable d for diameter. The diameter is the distance across the circle, but the key is that it has to go through the center. And the last word we have here, we usually say perimeter for the distance around a figure, but the distance all the way around a circle is called the circumference. We abbreviate circumference with the variable c. Alright, so let's try some of these problems. First, let's fill in our formula. We can say the circumference, c, is equal to its diameter times pi, or we can also write this as 2 times the radius times pi. Why is this? Well, if you look back up here, if I put two radii together, I get the diameter. So the 2r is the same thing as the d. So since you have two separate formulas, you could write them separately as well, that are both equal to circumference, you can use them in different sorts of problems. If the problem gives you the diameter, I would use the first one. If the problem gives you the radius, I would probably use the second one. It says, find the circumference of the circle and round to the nearest tenth. Okay, the first one says the diameter is 3.75 feet. So I would write d equals 3.75. Since it has diameter, I'm going to use the circumference formula that has diameter in it. And now I'll plug it in. Pi times the diameter. Now on your calculator you will see a pi button. Please do not plug in 3.14 because we do not want to round yet. It wants our final answer rounded. We don't want to plug in numbers that are already rounded. So when you hit pi, then hit times and 3.75, rounding to the nearest tenth, you get 11.8 feet. This next one says the diameter is 5.1 millimeters. So I would write d equals 5.1. Again, since I see diameter, I'm going to use the circumference formula that has diameter. I would type in pi times 5.1 equals, and I'm going to round to the nearest tenth, which would be 16.0 millimeters. Find the circumference of a circle with a radius of 7. Round to the nearest tenth again. So first I would see that my radius equals 7. In this case, they give me the radius, so I'm going to choose the circumference formula that uses r instead. I'm going to plug into my calculator 2 times pi times 7. If you wanted to make it more simple, when you plug in, you could just do 14 times pi. Remember, you can move the numbers around when you're multiplying. We call that the commutative property. So 2 times pi times 7, rounding to the nearest tenth, gives me 44.0 millimeters. A Ferris wheel has a circumference of 226. What is the radius? So first, I would notice this one's a little bit different because it gives me the circumference, and it's asking me what the radius is. I suggest you stick with your circling and underlining. So I'm going to use the circumference formula that uses radius, since nowhere in the problem does it ask me about the diameter. I'm going to now plug in the variable I know. I know the circumference. Now I'm solving for a different part, but I can get my r by itself. I'll divide both sides by 2 first. And then lastly, I would have to divide both sides by pi. It doesn't say what to round to, so we will just say this is about 36 meters. So just because your variable is on a different side doesn't mean you can't solve. It means we have to solve like we've been doing all year. I have to get the numbers to one side and the letters to the other so that my variable is by itself. A CD has a diameter of 120. A UMD has a diameter of 60. Compare the circumference. Okay, so let's split this up. We'll put CD over here and UMD over here, and we'll go one at a time. Well, CD has a diameter of 120, and the UMD has a diameter of 60. You might be able to predict the CD has a diameter that is double that of a UMD, so we might predict that the circumference is also going to be double. Well, I see that I'm using diameter, so I'm going to use the circumference formula that has diameter. (120) times pi gives me 377.0 for my CD. And now I'll solve for the UMD. Pi times 60 gives me 188.5. So now we can check our prediction here. If I were to do 188.5 times 2, I'm going to get 377.0. So in fact, if I were to compare, the CD is twice the circumference of the UMD. Alright, so that's the end of section 1. You can now begin